Gentlemen, I just want to ask one simple question.
It's always a simple question.
What is men's walk and talk?
Men's walk and talk is about men from whatever background they come from, whether it's religious, um, sexual preferences, different countries, Africa, Caribbean, Brazil, wherever they come, long as they're men of color in general. But we do have white men as well. But it's about being vulnerable in this space, speaking your truth, and hopefully by that conversation, you stimulate other ideas. And it's also to break down isolation, to improve friendship goals, because we don't just do the walks. We visit theaters, we visit museums, and as today, Dirk took us around a historical walk around Brixton and Loughborough Junction, which Dirk is gonna talk a little bit more about than I would, because he is born and bred in Brixton. They're gonna have a statue of Dirk in Brixton, trust me. God.
I was born in Jamaica, first of all.
I thought he was born in
And I
Brixton.
came to Brixton in 1981 after the first riots. The Men's Walk and Talk was set up by Chaka in association with Care for Carers.
Yes, yes.
And I joined the merry band of men because I saw the opportunity to be part of a little team of people doing good and promoting good mental health. Walking and talking every Sunday morning, every other Sunday morning now. We go different places, explore different activities, go to theatres. We've even been on a retreat, which we haven't mentioned yet.
Yeah.
And this gentleman, with some of the friends that he has made as a result of doing this, was on a cruise recently, going to Amsterdam. But what happens in Amsterdam stays in Amsterdam.
Nothing happened in Amsterdam, so there's nothing to report. But Men's Walk and Talk is about getting the community together. That's the most important thing. It's about us not having the dividers that keeps us apart. That's really what Men's Walk and Talk was about, the whole conception of Men's Walk and Talk. And the fact that men don't often have a space to have a conversation. Generally speaking, I'm generalizing when I say this, men are like lone lions. They like to spend a lot of time on their own. And one of the reasons why I decided to go along Men's Walk and Talk is because I read this article, actually remembered it, that in relationships, especially between male and female, when the male dies, the women live 10 or 20 years longer. But when the female died, the men only live a few years longer. So there's always a sense of companionship that's needed. So that's one of the reasons why Men Walk and Talk came about, is because I was reading articles about, especially actually men in the Afro-Caribbean community not talking. And also I wanted to explore that space where straight men and queer men can come together and have conversations, which I don't believe had been done at the time. I think it's done more and more now, because we have to sort of not forget our differences, but try and understand each other. And so that's really the mission behind Men's Walk and Talk, is to break down isolation, try and understand each other, and try and understand each other's differences, whether it's religion or others.
So, Dad,
Yes.
if you can talk a little bit more, like today, where we have
Yeah.
been, these historical sites and
So
gardens and stuff like that.
Chaka charged me with the responsibility of organizing today's walk and talk session. And what I was able to do was negotiate with a number of agencies along our route today that we would stop and visit and engage with the community center type spaces that we've operated in today. So it was with some planning. We run only 2 hours late, but that was okay. That was okay. Everything got fitted in, and we've finished late.
But
So
tell us about that Soweto thing.
so
That
so
really
the
intrigued me.
first stop after the rendezvous at Brixton Station, Brixton Underground Station. We must be careful. People could have gone to the train line. The Underground Station, we rendezvoused at 9:45 today. Many people were on time. We had a couple of strays. And then we stopped at the Hector Peterson Memorial that is at the junction of St. John's Crescent and Brixton Road, one corner of Max Roach Park. It commemorates the 16th of June 1986 Soweto uprising, where the government, the apartheid government at the time, was trying to enforce Afrikaans as the sole language to tutor in, and the young people had a spontaneous uprising in against that, and as part of the uprising, they as part of the opposition to the uprising, the government, effectively the government, opened fire on 116 students were killed in the Soweto uprising.
But let's be clear about that. Around that time, there was apartheid, which is quite strong around that time in South Africa. So it wasn't just about Afrikaans, it was about people's freedom to move between a township without having to carry passes. So let's put it in fuller context about that uprising.
It was the time of apartheid,
Yeah.
correct. Before Nelson Mandela was released. This is
1976, around that time.
Is it 76 or 86?
The
I can't
Soweto
remember.
uprising.
What year was it? I've forgotten.
Yeah.
It's during the 90s.
19...
Yeah, when Mandela was released.
No,
No,
I was
Mandela
talking
was
about the
released in the-
uprising was
Okay.
86. I think it was 86.
We will find it.
Yes, it's on the thing. Right.
Yeah. Then the next stop, where did we go?
So we then, I had a program schedule. I'd negotiated with Slade Gardens. We walked down the Brixton Road to Slade Gardens for approximately an 11 o'clock rendezvous. And the Slade Gardens is a community gardens which has an adventure playground. They grow food. I first met them because I volunteered to help create a compost bin there. And I followed up by thinking it would be a good thing to have our walk and talk go through there to see how they operate.
Any teas or coffee?
No, we're going to.
Okay, cool. That's all right. That's fine. So yeah, this is our indoor space. As you can see, we transform it for parties, children parties, but then also fundraisers. So the local residents association, they usually have they call it a revolving dinner, where so they have a revolving dinner party where they you choose the houses you go to, you mix and match. You might have a starters at one house, the main at another house, the dessert at someone else's house, and then they all gather here in the evening to meet and mingle and party.
And we met a very nice lady by the name of Cadella.
Yeah, I think I can't remember. Yeah, it is. I think it might be Cadella.
Cadella.
Yeah.
And she was very hospitable, and we salute her for her ability to host our visit.
And I think what's interesting about that side is that not many of the men had been there. So this is very much new to us, even those of us who've been living in Streatham and Brixton for a number of years. This is very new. So for us, it was like entering an oasis because we've never been before. And some of the men have kids or nieces and nephews, children, whatnot, who can now go into these spaces and utilize these spaces because there's desperate need of people using them.
Absolutely. So through this, through our interaction with the project will gain some visibility and more people will know about it. So it's a win-win for everyone. We then walked along the Brixton Road to Normandy Road at number 22 Normandy Road. We stopped and looked at the house of where Cherry Gross was shot in 1981 by a police officer who should not have been entering the house, because they must have known children could have been present, and you don't send armed officers into a house with children present. It's actually policy that you don't do that. But they were looking for someone, and they inadvertently shot the woman of the house, Miss Cherry Gross, and injured her, and she was paralyzed for many years. In the book by Lee Lawrence, one of her sons, he reveals in the opening paragraphs that the shot actually killed her. That was the reason for her death, because it moved, and they that's part of the death certificate, that he discovered the shot must have moved,
bullet.
and the bullet must have moved and injured her spinal column beyond.
Now,
there-
how about the triggering of the riots? Is that one of the reasons that triggered?
Sorry, yes. So because of the shooting of Cherry Gross, there was an uprising in Brixton, because the community felt it was an infringement of rights. The community were insulted, and the community uprose and rioted. And it was an uprising.
No, I just want to know about the Cherry Gross thing. It's interesting for me, actually coming across this house, is because you often read things in newspaper, or you hear it in the news, and it's not close to you. You kind of like, there's this feeling like, okay, that's just over there. But today, when I actually saw that house and saw that plaque, a chill went down my spine.
Wow.
Just to see it for real, to see that, okay, over 30 or 48 years ago, something happened there that should not have happened. And so I think it's important that we visit these places and keep the memories of these people alive, because we don't want it to happen again.
In the same neighborhood, we located the Myettesfield North Community Center, where we stopped and had conversation. We had two major conversations, one of which was the alpha male. Who is an alpha male? What do we think
it's
about?
more, what's your personal definition of an alpha male?
Right.
Which is often very different.
Yes.
And then we also spoke about the new law, potential law about assisted suicide, which is quite an emotive subject for many of the men who are often dealing with people severely ill. And that's a serious decision that often needs to be made. And also, I think what's come out of that conversation there is that if somebody is severely ill, their illness can affect the entire people around and the family around them. And so that might be a decision. So the question was, should it now be law? And it being law, given an option to decide what to do with that law.
Really need to shut this down, and I'm going to shut it down by reading something, a post from a friend on Facebook, and she wrote, I wrote to our MP Tony Vaughan to ask him to support the assisted dying bill. It's something that I believe would be a good move. I'm sharing what I wrote to him here with you, so you understand my position. Some of you will disagree with this legislation, and that's okay, but this is how I feel. I have had a long career in health and social care, and a few years ago, I took on the position of registered manager at a 28-bedroom residential care home for older people. People who live in care homes are there because they are no longer able to support or manage their own lives independently. They have a multitude of physical and mental health issues and are often immobile, dependent, living with pain and discomfort, lonely and sad. As a qualified social worker, I have been in and out of care homes all my working life, and I can tell you that on the whole, they are a miserable existence where people are at the lowest point in their lives. So when I took over the manager role at this home, I really wanted to improve the quality of life for my residents. I decided to carry out a survey to find out what they thought was good about living there and what needed improvement. I took the survey to every resident and went through it, recording their answers. The last question in the survey was, if I could wave a magic wand, what is the one thing I could do to make you feel better? With the exception of only a couple of residents, every single person I surveyed told me they wished they could die. They were fed up being in pain. They were upset at the indignity of being dependent. They were lonely for family and friends who were dead or they'd lost contact with. They were frustrated with not being able to see or hear or stand or feed themselves. They felt they were just existing and that life had lost its purpose. Talking to those residents was a very sobering experience, and I went home and wept that evening. In another role, as a local authority safeguarding officer in the community, I have investigated many cases of abuse to older people and disabled people, physical and mental abuse, sexual and financial abuse, neglect and deliberate harm. It happens more often than the general public might imagine. Many victims I have spoken to have told me they wish they could die rather than live through these experiences. There is no fun in being weak and powerless. You may encounter this argument by saying, well, let's make their experience of life better. Let's improve care. Let's deliver better services. The reality is that that just isn't going to happen. Due to advances in pharmaceuticals and medical science, people are living longer and longer. However, at the same time, their support needs are growing alongside their increasing years, and we simply do not have the capacity to or funding to fulfill these needs and provide people with a dignified, respectful existence where their well-being is met. It is from decades of talking to older people, sick and disabled people who have simply had enough, and I have come to believe we should all have a choice to end our life. I believe we should each have the opportunity to take that final powerful decision which can give us absolute control in an increasingly powerless and meaningless existence. Of course, strict protocols need to be in place to ensure the process is carried out safely and ethically, but that is but if that is in order, I believe there should be a legal option to be able to die when we decide to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful written statement. So after the Myatt's Field, we walked from there, from Myatt's Field, and we went to the San Mai Gallery, an art gallery with an exhibition on currently saying that they are exhibiting to raise emergency funds. They had a supporter who has pulled out 50% of the value of their costs for the year.
So this is 72
Loughborough Road, where Nellie Roberts used to live. She was a painter, and it says here she started to show her flower paintings in the family's shop window. Local orchid growers, the Measures family, lived nearby in Flodden Road, which is over that way. And they spotted Nellie's orchid painting at a time when the Royal Horticultural Society Orchid Committee was looking for an artist to document life-size portraits of its award-winning blooms. So a local artist lived here around, was born in 1872, the daughter of William and Rebecca Roberts, who ran a watchmaker's shop at 92 Loughborough Road, formerly number 72, for over 30 years until 1908. From there, we walked to Loughborough Farm. There is a project there selling second-hand goods, and I just introduced us briefly to Loughborough Farm. We left Loughborough Farm and we stopped briefly at an arch which my dad seemed to have. My dad did the work there to transform it from a train arch to a usable space a few years ago now, like in the 70s. So from there we walked to the community centre that is creative arts on the Moorland estate underneath Southwick House building. And we made a brief visit there. It's a gentleman by the name of Joss Bryant, who I know very well because we've visited the project before. And he was kind enough to accommodate our visit and promise us that we would have access to the space for the future. We negotiated that in January, perhaps, we will come back there for an art class for our membership. We walked along to Brixton Street Gym. Again, I pre-negotiated our access to the space, and I was actually quite blown away how receptive he was to us.
Fred.
And Fred was very kind to give us a great welcome and spend time telling us about his project. That was the sum of today's walk and talk.
I think the most interesting thing that we have to acknowledge in our communities, these spaces we go to, they're actually surviving on a thread. And unless we utilize by using these spaces, they will not be part of our communities anymore. Because there are big companies waiting to snap up these spaces. They literally are waiting, and it's a waiting game. And we don't want to come back and say, oh, why did that place close down? Because we didn't use it. Sometimes it depends on our usage of these spaces that keeps it going, and a constant battle to keep it open. Because as soon as we take our foot off the gas, we'll see a department store, we'll see a block of flats that even the people in those areas won't be able to afford it to them.
We need to make sure that the project exists in that space and it's threatened with redevelopment. We need to negotiate with the council, bring pressure to make sure that we allow that space to continue to exist within the development that they have planned for that space. And if we don't fight for it, then we won't have access to it. So we must raise our voices in support of Brixton Street Gym to make sure that they continue to have space within the community developments that are.
Yeah, absolutely. It is about solutions at the end of the day, because there's. Okay, I'm going to give you some statistics here. In our community, we're more likely to suffer from diabetes, hypertension, isolation, mental health, the whole shebang. The whole idea of men's walk and talk is to shine a light on that. And also by shining a light on that, allow ourselves to say, you know what, we can help ourselves. We can make betterments for ourselves. We don't always have to rely on governments to dictate how we should live. And what I mean by that is most of the ailments that are affecting us are lifestyle ailments, that we can make a difference to that. So in many of the men's walk and talk, we'll invite nutritionists on board, diabetes specialists on board, doctors on board, to give them the knowledge to better look after themselves.